Hi, I'm Kate Kripke, and welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. This podcast brings the reality of motherhood to the table for real, honest conversations. Here we laugh, we cry, we learn, we grow, we are awestruck, amazed, humbled, and validated. But most importantly, together we begin to live in a new way that allows us to recognize the immense role that our own health and well-being plays in the health and well-being of our kids. Together we recognize that everything we do to take care of our physical, psychological, social, and spiritual health is in service of our children. This season, we're diving deep into the role that the shoulds and shouldn'ts and rules and expectations play in our motherhood journey. Together this season, we will learn to break those boundaries that hold us back from our greatest potential. We're going to be hearing from the moms who have taken this risk, from experts who help in this journey, and from family members who, Lord help me, have important insight to share. So pull up a chair, my friend, make a cup of tea, pour a glass of wine, put on your walking shoes, turn up the volume in your car. Let's do this together because nobody should mother alone. Hey there, incredible listeners. Today I'm talking with Anna Rahe about the ways that our bodies tell us exactly what we need to find peace, fulfillment, and well-being, both physically and beyond. For the past 25 years, Anna Rahe has explored a transformative and empowering relationship with fascia, helping people invest in their health, restore vitality, and heal themselves using proprietary tools that she herself has developed. As the founder and CEO of GST Body, Anna has spoken about holistic body care through fascia around the world, partnered with top athletes, surgeons, physicians, and celebrities, and has been featured in various publications from Shape and Elle to the Wall Street Journal. Throughout her career, Anna has had the pleasure of working with and helping over 10,000 people find lasting change by restoring their bodies and reclaiming an ageless, vital life. She, my friends, is also the mom of 3 beautiful children. Today, we dive deep into the ways that we can all better understand and work with our bodies to create the lives that we most want, a skill that I'm pretty sure most of you were never taught. Even with my 2 decades worth of knowledge around mental health and well-being, I learned so many new things in this conversation and was quite frankly blown away by the science that Anna shared. There are several simple and accessible ways to very quickly shift our nervous systems out of a heightened state, and you are going to learn about them here today. So just a quick note before we get started. A word that you're going to hear over and over in today's conversation is fascia. I've now said it 3 or 4 times. For those who are not familiar, fascia is a thin casing of connective tissue that surrounds and holds every organ, blood vessel, bone, and nerve fiber and muscle in place. The tissue does more than provide internal structure, though. Fascia has nerves that make it almost as sensitive as your skin. When you're stressed, your fascia tightens up. This tension we feel in our bodies is often the first sign of a nervous system response, and by getting more aware, we can use these early somatic experiences of body tightness to alert us and redirect us towards more calm. So that's about it. Let's jump in and let's get healthy. Hey listeners, there is literally nothing that I feel more inspired by than working with women who are ready and motivated to take control of their mental health and well-being in service of their kids. Because here's the thing, in my work, I get the opportunity to both watch the women who I work with feel better, and I also get to watch how their kids thrive along with them. If these conversations motivate you, and if you're ready to shift out of the anxiety, guilt, and overwhelm that you feel and move back into confidence, calm, and connection, my 12-week program might be for you. If you want to learn more and talk with me about if it's a fit, go ahead and book a free clarity call with me. The link is in the show notes.
Anna Rahe.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on your
Thanks
podcast.
for coming to the couch and talking to the people and drinking the tea.
I know the tea's the Kool-Aid? No.
The Kool-Aid. Thanks for shaking the Kool-Aid.
I just got this Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid there. No. Okay, so we are going to rest today, just for our listeners to be reminded, because they got an intro of you before we started recording today.
Okay.
But we together are going to dig deep into the body
Let's do
your thing.
That's my
We're going
thing.
to dig deep into the body and how our bodies are, I don't know, messengers, hold the information for us in times of discomfort,
Yes.
and how we can actually tune into our bodies and use our bodies to move through
Our tensions.
our tensions. And I love that word tension
Yes.
because there can be so much tension at home.
That's right.
I mean, in life in general.
In general.
I mean,
I experience life as one continuum of tension.
You know what someone said to me the other day, which I actually thought was interesting? I heard it on like a YouTube video or something. It was such a good example. You know those exercise bands?
Yeah.
He was saying those bands don't work unless there's tension.
That's right. Tension is an essential ingredient to life. And they show in childhood development that, neurodivergency can be actually addressed by giving children points of tension. We need tension because it's our feedback. Tension is what gives our sensory feedback to us. So I think that in this day and age, our litmus test of if our life is successful is that we should have no tension.
Yeah.
We should have no struggle. We should have easy. Why is this not easier? I find myself asking that still myself, and I know better, but I think that we tend to think that a sign that we are being an effective parent, or if we're being an effective partner, or if we should have, no tension. And the idea is that it's not too little tension or not too much. It's the right amount of tension, which is why I love my platform is with fascia. And there's this term called biotensegrity. And it's basically the concept that our cellular structures all the way up to our physical structures, and I bring this into the psychological and spiritual structures of who we are as humans, are built upon the symmetries of our tensions. The amount of health and balance of wellness as who we are as people is based not on having no tension, not of having too much tension, but the right amount of tension. So you look at like architectural designs of the spine. It is built upon the tensions of suspension that give us our body's form. And it's the intellectualism of our nervous system and how our nerves run in our brain that actually create the tensions on the framework of our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And so if you take this biotensegrity model into a psychological realm and you're like, this tension is actually in service of me. It's giving me this feedback. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just like, what is this? And then the question becomes, I do it in the body for pain. Tension can create pain if it's not resolved, if it's not animated. What I talk a lot about is making your tissues and your emotions animated, the things that you need to process. And if it's animated, it's not static and sitting on you, and it's not creating toxic tension. It's created animating life tension, and that means that it's going to move. This moment is going to metabolize into another moment that's going to be different. And we want to figure out, how do we take that tension, bring it to life, honor it, figure it out, feel ourselves and get feedback, and then move through. And it's not something that is stationary and static, which creates septic tensions. And that's what most people don't know. And especially as parents, I think that it's like, we don't know how to move our tensions.
You just said something that was so interesting. So let's just say that tension in general can be physical or psychological, emotional, right?
Yes.
We should have used three. I think body, physical is like body.
It's called mechanical tension.
Mechanical tension.
And we have psychological chemical loading. Okay. It's all called loads in physics.
Yeah.
Physics is happening all the way around all the time. And so loading is what creates stress, right? And the stress is what we experience as tension. And so you can have mechanical load, you can have psychological load, and then and that's how it comes in forms of neurotransmitters and chemicals. We call it the hormone or the chemical cocktail of experience, where your body goes to an experience, produces the chemicals that you then translate as this, which is where
like cortisol.
That's right. Adrenaline. Yes. Epinephrine, all of those. And so all of a sudden you're like, okay, this load that I'm carrying is actually affecting my body. That's one continuum. And that's why I love fascia. That's what I do, is that fascia is very bioactive to both our mechanical loads, like picking up heavy things, carrying our kids, the, exercise we just did, the biking, whatever. And then our psychological loads get this chemical experience, and the fascia contracts and has holding patterns. And you experience this when you're like sassy teenage daughter is like screaming in your face and you're like, oh my gosh, my chest is just like restricting. That's actually a physical response of the fascia that is trying to process the hormone experience that you're having in that moment. And it's really cool because if you take it out of this like psychological thing, you can actually become very present and use your body to be like, I need to mechanically discharge this.
Wait, pause for 2 seconds.
Yes.
Can you define fascia?
Yes.
Because I think there might be people like, what is that word?
Yes. Fascia is a type of body tissue, and it's kind of akin to saying your shirt is cotton or your pants are made of lycra. It's a fabric. It is 30% fiber. It is 70% water. And it is formed into this like beautiful, delicate gel-like scaffolding that's everywhere inside of you. So if you were to kind of peer underneath your skin, you'd see like cobwebs of delicate gel wrapping everything. It's around muscles. It's around your organs. It's around your nerve endings. It's around your eyes. It's everywhere. It's permeating everywhere. And the type of tissue actually organizes an entire body system, like your digestive system, like your vascular system, like your musculoskeletal system. The connective tissue system formed by fascia serves many different functions in your body. And it's basically that it has its own organs, the way that it's organized around every other system. It's kind of a big deal because it's really working behind the scenes in an autonomic fashion. So it's really deep
Automatically.
Yeah, you're not controlling it. However, there's also, and this is what is empowering for listeners who want to change either body or, mind or spirit, is that it's also somatic. And you can control how you do it. Somatic just means like a muscle. I can choose to blink. I can choose to move my hand or my bicep. So fascia has a way of being able to contract and release. And you can choose to do that in a way that actually moves energy through your body.
Oh my God, this is fascinating. Okay, so let's just back up for a minute and say, okay, if we have a mom of one or more children,
Yes,
from infancy through young adulthood,
yes,
right?
Age and stage. I know, right? I was like, age and stage. That's right.
Right. Like we know that every stage of childhood has those moments where we're going to feel tension. Like I can think of in infancy, our baby's crying, we don't know why.
That's right.
Where we want our baby to sleep, and as they're sleep,
they learn to say no it too.
Oh my God, they learn to say no, or they don't sit still, and you want to get something done, right. Or to your point, they're teenagers and they have a whole world of their own, and they're not sharing that information with you, and you're making up stories in your head. I mean, and then they go off to college, or maybe they go off on, like, there's just all these stages. And then there's all the relationship stuff with you and your husband or wife or partner or whoever it is, and your own parents. Okay, we get the gist. Yeah. There's tension. Okay. So something's happening. And when I teach emotion regulation and changing emotion to my clients, we talk about before we could do anything, we have to go inside first. I love that. What am I feeling? Like literally, what am I feeling? Not I'm feeling like my child will never sleep. That's a thought. And not I'm feeling, not even necessarily I'm feeling anxious, although that's helpful. I'm like, oh, what does it feel like? And is your chest tight? Are your toes rigid? Is your jaw? Like, what are you feeling? I'm assuming that when you're talking about this, that is a very important step in the process, is to be able to understand that if there's tension out here, there will be tension in.
Yeah, your body is your internal barometer. It is taking the reading of your understanding of what's happening. I like to call it the body kind of the defining rod, where it's like having the visceral experience, the somatic internal configuration of what you're perceiving on the outside, which is why you want to come in, because that's where the information is. The information is not actually in the head. It's being collected through the sensation. So one thing that's interesting about fascia is that it is your body's organ of consciousness, the way that your brain is the organ of mind consciousness. And they create this symbiotic relationship in communication. Fascia has 10 times as many sensory receptors. Those are the things that are collecting the information that we live through: heat, chemicals, light, pressure. All of those things come in through our fascia and the connective tissue system and are delivered to an area of the brain called the insula. And so when we are busy spinning out about something cognitively and trying to like figure it out with logistics and it's all data, that's actually only one side of the information. And what you're doing that's brilliant with your clients is you're getting them to actually get more information by dropping in. There's better information. There's more of it than just by the analysis alone. And it's coming from feeling. And I liken this oftentimes to like kind of cognitive is heavy data load.
Yeah.
And tissue is very analog. It's where the static lives. It's where the ache, the pain, the twinge, and it's both informations are important, but we tend to value in this culture and try to find solutions solely by cognitive and not by somatic.
So let me ask you a question about this.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 things. My first question is, when we feel tension in our bodies, would you say, just to clarify, that
Yes.
that tension we feel in our bodies is quote unquote caused by the thoughts we're having, our perception of what's happening in the environment?
It is, yes. I would say that it's kind of a two-way street, right?
Okay.
So you have a physical experience and your brain goes to work trying to create a cocktail of chemicals to translate that experience and say to your body, yes, what is this? No, well, and the body is listening. Like that's where trauma comes in, right? Like let's say that you're sexually abused as a kid, it enters in through the tissues first, and then the brain has to translate it. And then the brain sends the message back and says, either this is really bad or this is okay, you're safe, or right. So it's not one does only one. It's like, I call it encircuiting.
Yes.
Right. Where one is telling the other. The problem is that most of the time, the brain will give these chemicals, the body kind of tries to translate them back and says, I think this is what's happening. And the brain goes, no, no, no. And that's where we kind of get this disconnect from head to heart, as it were, is that there's an interruption in our body's ability to, I just gave you all this information. I think this is what's happening. And the brain goes, right? And so we second guess, or we don't like listen to deeper senses of truth. And they're showing that there is, the intuitive brain versus the, cognitive brain, the ENS, the enteric nervous system, which is nerves that are in your guts. And it's really this like gut sensation that's more intuitive based rather than cognitive based, where it's giving you more information. So when you think about how you're perceiving things, you do need to read your senses, and the brain is part of this body experience. But I think that most people would get stuck in their brain. It's becoming less of service. And it's like the idea is that the information is not supposed to cling on. It's supposed to be transient. It's supposed to be metamorphical. It's supposed to take you through these processes. But what we end up doing is locking in, and then we just lock down and we get stuck and we spin, and then we get anxiety, and then it becomes toxic. And so I think that the idea is giving the right weight, the right tension to the right part. Sometimes we have to work our brain a little bit, but oftentimes we overemphasize that tension and we can't get through it. And the body gives this great opportunity to be like, sometimes you don't need to go into your story. Sometimes you don't need to go into the narrative that's stuck in your head. Like, my mom was like this, and I don't want to be like this, and I'm not going to live this again, and I'm going to do it differently. And it's like, wait, that's distracting. That's noise. But if you like sit with your kid and you just drop in and you drop into your tissues and you're like, all I want to do is connect. And I want to actually feel what you're feeling. Another cool thing about fascia is that it's a membrane. It is not a locked circuit. So you literally can sit there with your child on the thing, and your fascia will respond to what your child's fascia is doing.
Yeah, I had a really funny experience. Maybe you can help me understand this. I have like so many questions for you. I want to make sure I don't forget anything.
Okay.
But I had,
I talk about things.
No, it's great. But to pause to go back when my daughter was, I can't remember how old she was. She was young. One of my daughters was born tense.
Interesting.
Okay. Never used that word in explaining this. One of them was born like whatever.
Yep.
And the other was born a little more tense. And they tend to still have that temperament about them. Okay.
That's right.
I took my daughter, my younger daughter, to
Is she the tense one?
yes,
Okay.
to what was he doing? It wasn't cranial sacral, but it was some sort of body work.
Okay.
I'll think of it before we finish this conversation, or right after, probably. But it was
right.
hands-on body work, and it was, kind of energy work, but through realigning.
It was a Reiki or something?
It wasn't Reiki. I'll think of it.
That's right. They were.
I think he may have been an osteopath by training.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was doing all these moves on my daughter, and my body started making noise.
Yeah. That's right.
I started, when he was working in a certain part of my daughter's body, my stomach started grumbling.
That's right.
My body was responding to his release of her nervous system.
How old was she?
6, maybe?
Yeah. So children, actually, there's 2 reasons. One is that you share a similar auric field, energy field, until an embryonic break at around 6 and 7 is when that break starts to happen. So depending upon how shared and how tight that interaction is, that can be part of it. And I think also when you're so connected to your children and you share similar physiological things, I just heard this awesome thing. I'm not going to quote it because I only heard it yesterday and then I have to go back and read it. But our mitochondria in utero comes from our mom. When the sperm and the egg meet, the mitochondria from the dad melts away. And so it's really the mother's lineage that is actually fueling the cells of the child with the mitochondria. And I think that the levels of intelligence at different levels of physiology would lead to this type of somatic inclusion, where you're experiencing as your daughter's experiencing, because you're shared in the intelligence of cell to structure to organ.
So this is so I'd love for you to talk. Oh my gosh, I hope I remember all my questions for you, but I'm going to go with this one because this feels good. I want you to talk more about this idea of a shared energy field. In my work, from a science-based attachment perspective, we say that from 0 to 3 is when the most substantial foundation of attachment happens, right?
Yes,
we can repair attachment forever, but 0 to 3, when the child's brain hasn't yet evolved past age 3, is when that child begins to understand, is this a safe attachment? Is this attachment safe? Can this person tolerate me and all of me? Is this a safe place to come back to? Can I trust this? But from a very relational based perspective. And what I also talk about is the interplay between maternal and child mental health.
Yes.
Right. So if you're my mother and you're anxious, you're dealing with a lot of anxiety, when I'm with you, I'm going to embody that because of your subtle facial cues and the body tension that I feel when I'm on your lap or when you're when you hold me, I will feel how exactly your tone of voice, even your scent. We even give off, right? Yeah, exactly. That as a child, if you're feeling anxious or stuck in anxiety, I will feel that. That's my description from a psychological perspective. But when you say energy field, I have a feeling you might be talking about something else. Can you help us understand?
Yeah, let me see if I can put it together. And some of this is what I've seen in my work, and it's still kind of an open field in terms of study of how fascia is related. But so in my understanding, the fascia is forming the body's quantum energy field. It's literally your body's smart grid. If you think about it from a electromagnetic field is running through fascia. It's hydroelectric run, and it's what's creating all types of energy exchanges in the body, whether it's from the cells out, we call it light frequency, or heavy frequency, high frequency from outside in. And fascia is behind the scenes, flexing and bending to move energy. And so there's this interesting idea of that energy happens in spectrum, right? The way light waves do. Yes. And so you have dense energy patterns that are more fibrotic, and they're inside the tissues. And then that will move into electrical and into alchemical, and that's where I think where the 7 layers of the auric field are. And so when we first are born, we are actually housed in the most material aspect of connection to mom. Yep. And then through life, you keep moving out into the lighter frequencies of that energetic field. And I don't know that it ever fully breaks, right? I mean, my mom is 81 and she still is telling me little things to do and remember. And I'm I was raised by you. Because her presence is still
You feel
wrapped her. I feel her. She feels me. And that's also not including the genetic component of like when we talk about, I go into somacology, which is using the body to read psychological story rather than just only the psychology where you're doing narration and stuff. And you let the body speak. And so somacology is this idea that there is truth found in the tissues. And the way that that ends up happening, I'll circle back around to the connection with mom and stuff, but is that you have these imprints. It's almost like in your tissues, fascia holds these like rings, like on a tree. And if you cut the tree down, you can see like, this is good growth. This was great years of, this was a fire. This is when the beetle killed. This is when so your story is really etched in your flesh. And the process of that happening in a very like generic way to understand is that you have these experiences. Your body is either carrying physical load. Like there's 3 influences. I don't go into them, but one is like just, I played soccer and I rolled my ankle. The other one is my mom has hip dysplasia and I got hip dysplasia because that's genetic. And another one is this is the emotional story that is running through me and my tissue contracts based upon my emotional cocktail of experience. And the more I order anxiety, the more my tissue conforms to an anxious, form or imprint. And so when we start going into these relationships of connection, energetic connection, you can go into it from those 3 different levels. And one is much more biological, like our genes. And that goes all the way through. Like, I don't believe only that your anxiety comes from birth. I think it comes from prenatal. I think that it's neonatal. I think that it's even 7 generations back. And I see that oftentimes in, I don't know if you're familiar with constellation work, but it's very fascinating. My mom is adopted and she lost her adopted mom at 10. And then she lost her and I look back and I'm like, my mom's wounds are transgenerational. And so I don't think my mom's spine is the same shape as her mom's birth mother's spine. And I'm like, it's a shame posture. And guess who's been fighting this for the last 25 years of herself. And so when you go into imprinting, I think that energetic imprint comes from many different places. And inside of that, then we have to go in and be like, we can change the way we think about something, but also our postures. And there's this field of sociology that looks at this, where I can win a race and my arms go up. Why is that? Because my biochemical emotional response is that of victory. And Ann Cuddy is one of the leaders in this research, and there's still stuff being done, but it says, well, what if I just throw my arms up? Could I experience the reverse chemical reaction? And I think that that's kind of what happens in this loop of connection to parent to child to transgenerational, where it's like, yes, you can look at your mom and she is distant and she is not attached and she is not connected, and you have that experiential severing, but that severing was happening deeper inside of her when you were in utero, when she is not connected to self on that level. And in the genetics of her grandma that had abandonment, that had right. And so I think that that's where the fabric of connection is much deeper, and the energy spectrum goes farther than just, here I am in my biology. Right.
Totally.
Hey, quick little break here. If you like the things that you hear here on this podcast, I want to invite you to come find me over on Instagram at Kate Kripke, KateKripke. Really committed to providing free support to moms everywhere. And the 2 places that I do that are here and over there. So if you're not following me yet over there, come on over and take a moment and DM me and send me a message. Introduce yourself. I love nothing more than connecting with people over in that community. So I hope to see you there.
So, okay. So I'm aware that as you're first of all, there's so much good stuff here. And I feel like some of it is going over my head just because it's like feels complicated, even though I have the sense that it's not as complicated as it sounds, but it's leading me to remind you and me and all of our listeners of something, which is that most of my clients, and I'm sure many of our listeners, are high achieving, very smart type A women who live in their heads a lot of the time. They're doers. They don't necessarily instinctively pause and reflect and feel. They analyze, they collect data, and they intellectualize, right? And so it's hard to move from here to here. I have two examples of where this might show up in someone's life because I'm actually thinking of two specific people. And I'm curious to know how you would talk about this with respect to your work. Okay. I think we can get through both of them. I'll make them short. The first one is someone who has a tendency to, when she feels ick or ugh or meh or whatever word fits your version of this thing, right? She just isn't, she's feeling bad. And maybe it's in her body, but I think it's almost more just like an emotional experience of, something feels off. I just don't feel good. She wants to figure out why.
Yeah.
She goes into her brain and she's like, well, she analyzes many situations to say, well, is it this? Let's analyze that. Is it that? And that analyzing and the trying to figure out the answer contributes to the angst and anxiety. And yet to her, like I'm sure many of our listeners, it feels intolerable to sit with the uncertainty and allow the uncertainty to be the experience of discomfort and to allow that just to be okay. So obviously I have a way of working with that with my clients from a kind of more psychological place. But how would you address that with respect to the tension in the body?
So I think the first thing is to help the brain in any case know the reason that it's hard to sit with yuck is because it feels dangerous.
Yes.
And our primal brain is like, I hate pain. I hate suffering. I need to get out of this. And I think that the higher brain can help and be like, this is going to pass. This too shall pass. That's one of my mom's favorite wisdoms of adages. It's like, this will pass. And so the first thing is to tell the brain, it's okay. This is not, and I do it in the body. Like people come in to me with really severe body problems and pain. And it's like, okay, I actually go in and I touch their body and I activate the pain. And they're like, that hurts. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to just sit with that for a minute. And I need you to feel this because I don't want to feel so much that you have to jump out of your body, but it's enough to trigger. And there's value in pain. There's value in discomfort. And you have to train your body and your brain to be like, this is just information. This isn't good. This isn't bad. This is neutral, actually. It's telling me something needs to move. Something needs, and from a mechanical load, I apply pressure and the pain increases until I teach them how to animate their fascia. And the moment they animate their fascia, it melts. It moves the pain and it dilutes it. That's how fascia works.
Meaning you might be pushing the same place on the body.
Yep.
They're doing something.
They do something and the pain distributes and becomes 50% lighter on the first repetition immediately.
Are you able to tell us what that thing is that they do here? Or is it more complicated?
It's not it's not complicated. It is literally that fascia has the ability to contract like a muscle. It has cells that are contractile in nature, and you can choose to activate the fascia in a way like you would your muscle. And when I teach you how to do that, it's like not a hard skill, but it's a subtle skill.
Yeah.
And it makes you have to tune in and you have to feel something because fascia doesn't contract with like the power of a muscle that's like bam, bam. You can tell when you like use a muscle. Fascia's like, do you feel me? It's like behind the scenes and it's a subconscious organ, right? It's not for in front on our whisper. It is a whisper, but it's actually very potent. It's a very powerful. It's a good reminder that most of the things that are really potent in change and transformation are the subtle things, not these big, loud life changes. That's right. Very subtle. So that's why the importance is not to get over it, not to move through it. It's to be with it.
Yes.
Because most of the time, the fascia just needs a little like, if I feel a little too much pressure, it's built to move. And if you feel uncomfortable, your spirit is meant to move that tension. Yeah. And the reason that the reason that your client is experiencing more of it is because the body's saying you're overloading what I'm trying to get you to move, right? Back to the first conversation of load and stress. It's like you are psychologically loading. You need to turn her best tool is to get in the body because then you're like, oh, all I have to do is move this. Okay, well, my first thing that I would tell her to do is arch your spine. The next minute that you feel this, lay over your bed, lay over your couch, open your chest and lay there for 30 seconds. And immediately the brain will turn off. And this is physiological. The parasympathetic turns on because you've stimulated the vagus nerve. And all of a sudden, your body will feel 50% better just by doing the motion rather than trying to figure out why you feel bad. And so all you have to do is do something physical. It lightens the load that you're already carrying on your mind, and it's giving it an alternative. And if you do that every single time, pretty soon your brain will be trained to be like, I don't need to keep loading this. All I need to do is offload it. And I can do that through a different system. I can do it through a different organ of consciousness. And it will change your physiological state. Wow. Which will clear the load of your brain.
And
clear the
makes
thought.
So much sense to me. It makes so much sense. You're really changing neural pathways too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that, when you're having that experience, your brain goes into the
overload
or the opening and like releasing.
That's the answer. The medicinal antidote is, and I think most people don't care how it comes; they just want the reprieve.
100%.
So then it's like, don't keep going into the brain. Like, make it a physical habit to like just traction your spine. It's a weird thing that literally doing that in incremental dosing, I call it microdosing, where it's like you just do this the moment you start to feel the ramp. And I have a brain like your client.
Yeah.
So I was so spun, right? That it was such a relief for me to be like, I don't have to use that to get free. I don't have to use the same system. And in fact, the nervous system is saying to you, do not use this system to free you. I am already overloaded. And so by taking that into the body and letting the body change the chemistry, right? Just by stretching your spine like that changes your biochemistry. And that the neurotransmitters sink in, and then and so it's an alternative to healing is freedom in the moment.
Right. So this other one, actually, I have a feeling you may give the same quote unquote treatment or antidote, but the other type of problem that we see a lot, me, you, my clients, your clients, many people, is this woulda, coulda, shoulda. Okay, this like really hard time trusting the decisions that she has made in the past. The woman who like makes decisions and then second guesses them again and like can't put them away, and then has a really hard time trusting herself to make farther decisions because she's afraid she'll make the wrong choice. So it's this paralysis, right? It's a paralysis between the past and the future because you're just stuck with, what if I'd made this different decision, or how, that like obsessive ruminating, going back, thinking of regret, and also hyper analyzing the next decision for fear of making the wrong decision moving forward. And that causes so much anxiety, and it shows up as sort of obsessive, compulsive, ruminating thoughts, sometimes of catastrophe, sometimes of harm, sometimes of regret or guilt, and unable to turn the thoughts off.
It's called contracture, right? It's when your brain and your nervous system over contracts around issues, and muscles do that, right? The tissues in the body can become over contracted, and it makes them rigid, and it makes them unable to spread, to flow, to hydrate, and so for people who have, and I used to be in that, it's probably she was raised by really right and wrong thinkers and good and bad and this binary way of thinking. It's one of the hardest things, I think, to change.
Yes.
And I think that one of the reprieves, number one, is to get into the body. And I had a really hard time. And one of the things that was very helpful is to take it out of this cognitive like data point, right? Because when you're analyzing data points. If this could happen, then this could happen. And this could happen, then this could happen. And the general thing is things that create goodness, that create joy, that create lightness of being. What we're looking for is to lighten our loads. Yes. We want to literally take, and that's what fascia does. It takes any type of load, chemical or mechanical, and it's a network of spongy water that spreads things out and dilutes that load and helps to carry it. And so when you can take something and you say, I was talking about this with a client today about consciousness, but the idea that when things can spread and create space, it's a lightening. It's a lightening of load. And so for a person who is constantly doing data, you want to get them into a very clear, simple framework of feeling, of spectrum feeling, not binary feeling. And so you have to say to yourself, okay, I am going to What makes me feel lighter? What makes me feel more spacious? What makes me feel, first is breathing. Like, right? That first thing is just your lung expansion creates internal space in the fascia, and that immediately feeds space to your brain. The idea of contraction is feeling heavy and dark. And so usually I'll teach people just that feeling of like, sit with the feeling of heavy, dark. Now feel the feeling of light, and then ask her to make decisions only on that feeling. You don't get
light feeling.
light versus dark, right? The light versus heavy. It's not dark.
So you're
it's
saying
light versus
which
heavy.
choice, which option feels
Yes.
heavy and dark, and which option feels light? Yeah.
Yep. And you're going to have this thought and you're going to be like, I don't know. And you're going to be like, yeah, you do. And you just sit there and you're like, right now, when I have the thought, it's heavy. Well, what would bring a little bit lighter? What would bring a little bit lighter? And what I would suggest you do is have her lay in an arch. Have her expand her front body. Flexion of the front body is completely sympathetic stress response. It's the getaway. It's the protect my vital organs. It's the primal fetal position. So you don't make decisions from sitting there thinking like this. Arch your back over
your computer,
That's
looking
right.
at Google, and
That's right. And finding sourcing, and literally lay over a Bozu ball, lay over an arching thing, an arch, and it will stretch your front body. It decreases the tension on your diaphragm. There's an area of your body called your adrenal belt that is where your adrenal glands sit. And when they are mechanically loaded from sitting or psychologically loaded from stress, they will produce this cocktail of, and so it contracts your tissues and pulls you in. It's very physiological. It's like, what if I just created the state of openness from which to think? And the more I visit that feeling of openness, the feeling of stretch and spread, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that thought does not feel like that. That's not the right one. That's not the right one.
You know what you're reminding me of, Anna, which seriously, I didn't come up with this. This is a very well-utilized template, but it's this template of be, do, have. Right?
Okay, tell me about it, yeah.
Right. That if I want to have more closeness with my child, or more calm in my household, or have a life of balance, right? If I want something that I want to have, I actually have to be the embodiment of that thing.
That's right.
In order to do what that body would do in order to have that thing. So that's what I'm thinking of, like with your ball. Like if I want to, I have to be open. I have
in order
to, like,
for my brain to think, oh shit.
Exactly.
That's 100% true.
In order for me to do the thing that's going to help lead me to what I want to have, I have to be somatically that version of the thing first. And I've always thought about it with respect to emotions. Like one thing that I'll talk about is like, you know, if I want to be the woman who moves easily from work to home life, you know, it's not crunchy and tight and tense and rushed. It's more melodic. And did I make up that word? But you know what I mean?
Melodic is good.
Right. That if I want that, I actually have to feel in my body first what that would feel like.
That's right.
And then I have to, I have to do my next action from that place of feeling the feeling. So I often talk about with emotions, but I think the body experience is huge.
Well, it helps to then know what the feeling is, and it will tell it to the brain. Yes. When you're in a contractured state in your brain, you can't feel anything but the weight, the load of that thought, that brain. And so what I will end up with clients doing is I'll be like, let's create it in your body. And then there's actually cranial movements that you can do to actually do the exact same thing. So fascia is such a static tissue that what you do below literally can be created above. And so you can lay there and hang and then be like, what if my brain were to do the exact same peeling, the same like revealing, the same opening, and you're dealing with it like on the physio, so it's not psychological yet. And then you say, okay, my brain is peeled open, I'm feeling open. And then you go, okay, now what was that thought that what was the answer I was trying to get? I want the one that feels the most like this rather than the one that feels like this. And it's a feeling. And if you can they talk about this a lot in neuroplasticity, that if you ski the same run over and over again, you're only going to dig deeper. You're only going to be farther in the rut. Yes. And so what I love about somatic and fascial work is that it gives you a completely new pathway to be able to start doing the same thing. You need to do the same work. This woman still needs to do the work to unwind her anxiety and our mental loads. But if you keep using the thing that's loaded to try to create the change, it's almost impossible. And then it just feels like even more, it's like, I can't go there anymore. And then you become disattached, and then you become, disheartened, despondent, and more depressed. And it's like, depression is the state of being overly loaded. And no one, and I'm looking at humans across the board, we just have a big fail at how to metabolize our loads. Like skills, like just really simple skills that are not, let's think about it, let's know it better, let's, find the way through the maze. It's like, what if we just didn't even go into the maze, right? What if we had an alternative for that? And it's imperative. It makes me so much more present with my kids. I will feel myself like I'm looking in the fridge and I've got 3 of them shouting, and, my son is only 2 and he's crawling up and he's spilling the water on the table. And I'm like, okay, I shut the refrigerator door and I go over to my piano bench and I just lay on it. And my kids, it's interesting. It changes the entire dynamic. The kids kind of look at me and they're like, what are you doing, Mama? I'm like, resetting.
Oh God, that's so good. And back to what you said earlier, if you're all within the same energy field as you reset,
they do too. It is unbelievable how quickly my children's physiology changes the moment I do it.
Because all of our listeners can do that. Everyone has a ball or a chair or a whatever.
The arm of your couch, an ottoman. Okay. Like you could take your kitchen towel and take your arms above your head and just pull it and make your arms and your chest stick out. It's literally that rudimentary, that whatever the opposite is, the antidote, the medicinal stuff is stop doing the same thing. Yes. Do the opposite until you can get some finesse. And so just anything to open your chest. Hang off your bar stools, hang off your, because that decompression changes everything. It's like a tool that's life-changing.
We're all going to be telling our kids that we're resetting.
That's right.
This should be the new language. Anna says to tell you that we're just resetting. Anna, as we come to the end of this conversation, first question is there anything that we didn't talk about today or that you didn't say in this conversation that you wanted to make sure you said or let our listeners know? I mean, we just went with it. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more like what, meets people's.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we left folks with some easy to access practices. Yeah. You gave such a fascinating perspective to me on, it's funny because when I hear you talking about this, I'm talking about the same thing, but using different language and from a different perspective, and it fits so beautifully together. If someone wants to learn more about your work and get in touch with you, where can they find you? We'll put all this in the show notes too.
Right? Yeah, come to gstbody.com.
gstbody.com.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you offer folks right now?
We have an online digital subscription. To a video, a library that's really beautiful.
Which I am literally going to go join later today. Great.
Please, it feels really good. It's the best thing I think out there. Humbly, it healed me, right? And my journey is coming from there too. So it healed me. And we have an amazing program called Ageless Body, which is really going into this like whole spectrum of who we are and how that looks, both from our health, but also our wellness, health, body, and wellness mind, and what that looks like growing old and staying agile and staying fluid and staying, I think just self-mastery on a higher spiritual plane. So that's kind of also a 10-week course that's really quite potent.
It's really inspiring when we begin to open up to the reality that we get to choose how to feel. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to blame, to look at all the things outside of us and say, well, it's my desk chair, or it's the political system, or it's the environment, or it's my kid. And so it's so easy to blame all that stuff outside of us. We all do it. But when we can say, actually, we get to choose and there's things we can do, I find that so empowering.
And I love that's, I think, working first from feeling. I love your work with that, and the organ of consciousness that is giving you your feelings, that's collecting the feelings, is really, where those two things collide beautifully. So I love your work.
Ms. Redmond. Well, thanks for your work. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's really fun to be here.
I can't wait to talk more. Thanks for being here with us.
Hey listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love to request that you share it with one mom out there who you know might benefit. You know, there are a lot of women who feel like they're mothering alone, and it takes all of our help to make sure that everyone feels like they have what they need to both feel successful and also feel supported. So please take a moment and just share it with one person. And if you feel inclined, go ahead and rate and review this podcast, because the reality is that the more reviews we have and the higher ratings we have, the more this podcast is shared with other moms out there, which makes it more easy for them to find us. So thanks again for your help with this. And I'm assuming you do find this podcast helpful because you're still here at the end listening to this memo. So thanks for being here, and share away. Sending love.